Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Uh, Doing great. How are you?
Awesome. I think we can hear you. So we just had Bill introduce himself. But part of what I'd like to do is, have you introduce yourselves as well. But if you can also just mention what your favorite video game is, or has been, just to get us in the mood.
Okay.
Nick.
I'm Nick Alfieri. I'm the founder of Big Sugar and Digerati. We are an indie publisher. We're bootstraps. We've been operating for 8 years. We've shipped over 75 games on console and PC. Probably most hours in a game would be Binding of Isaac, but I think my nostalgia um, takes me to Wave Race 64, I think.
Oh, wow. Nice. Okay. And Michael, over to you.
Hi, I'm Michael Metzger. I'm a partner at Drakestaff Partners. It's a global media and technology investment bank. We advise tech companies on mergers and acquisitions and growth stage financings, and I'm spending most of my time on digital media and games. I have about 100 folks across the US, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. And I probably spend a good amount of time on with Fortnite.
Fortnite, okay. All right. My favorite video game is Galaga, by the way. I'm old school. I like the full console and just that feel of that button. So if we just kind of open it up, just in terms of, as publishers and investors, right? Looking out into 2022, what does the landscape look like? Just a general kind of 30,000-foot view. What are you seeing in the marketplace right now from your standpoint? What are you liking? Anyone, I'll just put these questions are designed just for anyone just to jump in, please.
Yeah, sure, I'll go. We are pursuing VR quite heavily. We shipped products on Quest 2 and saw some great performances with that, so we're kind of investigating PSVR 2 for early 2023. And we're very keen on kind of pursuing subscription deals with the key platform holders, obviously. It's difficult because of the market consolidation, which is something we're also paying close attention to. But yeah, developers have kind of got a lot of access to a lot more insights and data than they used to have. So we are kind of the developers are keeping up with the market quite well. VG Insights, GameStats.com, SteamDB, etc. So yeah, while the market's moving, we are seeing developers move with it as well.
Yeah, and Michael, from your point of view, what is 2022 looking like?
Yeah, so maybe put it a little bit into comparison to the previous years. So we spent a good amount of time looking at the overall deal activity and financing, IPO specs, and in 2020, we saw about a total activity of about 32 billion. Last year, 2021, was around 85 billion all in, so that includes all segments. This year, just in the first quarter itself, we're almost at 100 billion all in. And
Wow.
our projection is for all of 2022, we'll reach a total value of about 150 billion. So another massive growth. And a big driver for this quarter obviously was the Activision and Zynga acquisition, which are both massive. But what's also very exciting for the folks out there who are looking to get financing and raise a round, that activity also has increased dramatically. So for Q4 last year, for example, we saw a total deal value of over 5 billion invested in private gaming companies in over 200 deals. We're currently putting the Q1 report together, but it looks like in Q1 of this year, we already saw a record of 250 investments in private gaming companies. And what's also super exciting is that a large number of new funds and follow-up funds, a lot of additional money flowing in the industry with Maker announced a fund, Pitchcraft announced another fund, Griffin Gaming. So there's a lot of follow-up, much larger follow-up funds, as well as new funds that specifically focus on the vertical. And it's much easier to raise money now than it was, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago. So, and all this money is obviously driving the future unicorns in the space. So overall, space is very exciting.
Well, in 2022, there are three big things people talk about in the industry. Number one is cloud gaming. Players will need to buy expensive hardware or buy expensive GPU to play the latest titles.
Yep.
So many big players are investing in the streaming cloud-based future. That's number one. Number two is NFT and blockchain. Well, it's kind of controversial. Play to earn doesn't sit well with many gamers here, but it's getting really popular. For Axie Infinity, it had over 1 million DAU. Many people in the developing country make a living by playing Axie Infinity. So we'll see how that play out. The third thing is about the metaverse. Mark Zuckerberg gave a big push to metaverse. Actually, for industry professionals, metaverse not something new. We've been doing that for decades. So with Mark Zuckerberg's push, many industry players are repositioning their titles as a platform. People can do a range of things inside the games, like a concert, have more social events there. So I think these three things are happening in the industry: cloud gaming, the NFT, and the metaverse.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm assuming from your standpoint, Nick and Bill, you've gone out to look for financing, and Michael, from your standpoint, you've been that guy. I guess from both of you, from both sides of this kind of relationship, as a publisher, what were the metrics that you felt were important? What were the things that you were talking about your organizations to get that financing? And then conversely, Michael, what were the metrics that you wanted to see or do want to see when you're investing in an organization? And maybe there's a mismatch, so I'm just kind of curious.
I can start. Over my career, I have invested in startups. I invested about 9 studios in the States before, and I also done publishing deals. There only one thing important. It's about great people. I can give you one quick example. In 2008, I made a studio in Seattle. There are 13 people. They didn't have funding. And even some leads got offer from big publishers. They didn't want to take jobs. They want to stick with other people, other team members. Even they didn't have anything to show me back then. I was impressed by then, so I invested in the studio. And later, this studio became the developer of Torchlight, which have sold over 5 million copies with my initial $1 million investment. So working with great people, that's the only thing I want.
Okay. Yeah, I think we touched on that a little bit in the previous presentation, just how Canada does have that talent, but we need more investment, more attention, more energy in the sector in order to grow our talent. Nick, I'm wondering from your side, when you're going out to look for investment, what are those key metrics that you're pushing out?
So, as mentioned in the introduction, we bootstrapped the business, so we've got 0% dilution, and we did that for the first 7 years. And last year we brought on a lender, and the conversations were mainly around, obviously, our kind of back catalogue revenue, our upcoming pipeline, and then how we were going to collateralize the facility. And yeah, it was just quite a simple conversation, but it was the first time we've ever taken on any lending, so it was quite a stressful conversation.
Okay. And Michael, when you're looking at these organizations, what are the key metrics for you that you're looking at?
So we mainly advise on later stage, growth stage financing. I would, for once, echo Bill's statement that the team, kind of the quality and the track record of the team is probably the most important thing. If we look at some of those mobile titles, people who already have given out a little bit later stage and are looking for growth stage financing rounds, post IDFA, just having good retention metrics is probably on the mobile side became much more important compared to last year pre-IDFA. So I think all the mobile development publishers are looking to retain people they got as much as possible, as it's very hard to attract new people. They're very efficient. That's probably one. There's obviously a lot of money flowing into the crypto space. People there, they might opt to do a first NFT mint and then use that to raise more money around that. That's probably a good milestone. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. As industry professionals, there's probably an organization that you've worked with in the past that, let's talk about some of the bad things that happened and the things that didn't go as well as they should have in a business, either whether you've started it or whether you've invested it. When an organization goes bad, what are the things typically, or in your experience, that makes that gaming team go south?
Well, we're in a very tough industry. It's very hard to make a hit today. So there are many reasons why it didn't work out. But I have seen a lot of developers, like they mismanage their financials. For example, years ago, I went to a developer founded by former Blizzard developers. They have a strong background. They got over $30 million from investors. However, when I went to the office, I was very surprised by how nice the office was. And they also paid our people well when they show me their financials.
Yeah.
I think that's not right when you haven't made any money yet, but you spend so much money on office, on salaries. So that was a bad side. Like the finance are not well managed.
Yep. Okay. Nick?
So speaking from a publisher developer perspective, it's quite often the publisher is made out to be the bad guy in the situation, right? A lot of the times it's kind of
aren't they the bad guy?
Well,
Sorry.
Our number one aim is to make the product profitable, right? So it can occasionally become a standoff between the publisher and the developer, where we're maybe suggesting some slight changes or a different kind of marketing strategy, and sometimes it gets lost in translation that we are the ones that have the money on the table, be it anywhere from $50,000 up to our roof at the moment is like $850,000. But we're all kind of shooting for the same goal, and it can kind of get lost sometimes, and it definitely doesn't need to become a standoff. We have to work as a team, like equal partners, in order to kind of get there. But yeah, it can be difficult sometimes, because the model is a little bit funny, because we put the money up, but we don't have creative control of the projects. So and we are kind of going to combat that, moving forward by just going into developing our own IP. But we're going to also continue publishing. But yeah, that's a problem that does pop up from time to time.
Yep, absolutely. And Michael, any comments on that?
Yeah, one is maybe just for companies to closer follow or monitor the runway and keep enough time for alternative options. I run into several companies and gaming in general, it's very much hit driven, and it's often really hard to predict how well a specific title will go. But I run into several studios that we're hoping the game's going to turn around or not looking at any options. And sometimes they didn't have cash less than 6 months, sometimes only 3 months before they looked into they need to urgently try to raise some additional money or consider potentially a sale just to have a soft landing. And they run too close to pretty much being out of cash. At that point, they don't really have any options anymore. So just monitor that and just always keep, ideally, at least 6 to 12 months runway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The runway, the cash, totally hear that from both of you. Thank you. And I guess we have here in the audience independent publishers and indie gamers themselves. I guess if you were to give them one piece of advice as they grow their organizations, as they grow their teams, they go out into the market, what would that advice be, if it could just be one?
Well, the entry barrier is much lower than before, as all the development tools are widely available and very affordable. So it's very easy to start a studio, build your own games. But it's much difficult to succeed than before. There are so many games launched every day, every month. So building a team is very challenging. I think managing growth is very important. You don't want to grow too big, getting too expensive. You have to be very careful about your runway.
Yeah.
That's similar to your last question.
Yeah.
Manage your growth. Make sure you can get your game launched within budget, on schedule. That will be very important to survive as an indie developer.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I'd say follow the data and make your first game a data-driven project, because like you guys have said, it's difficult enough to kind of have a hit. Difficult enough to predict, but yeah, if you follow the data and you identify the gap in the market and where there might be a particular demand for a certain genre, you can still create your own kind of USP around that. But I would always recommend kind of being as data driven as possible, because the market is just very difficult at the moment. So we've had to do that ourselves. For the last couple of years, we've really kind of focused our strategy and our being a lot more data driven.
Yeah, one thing that might be helpful, just having a small circle of trusted advisors, whether those are CEOs of other companies that are similar to potential investors, and some people where a small network just consult on all kind of issues and get their advice. I think that's also helpful.
Yeah. When you talk about advisors, are we talking about a board of directors? If you're looking at a board of directors, has that been advantageous to you, or has it not been? What is the benefit of having a board, or maybe not having the benefit of a board?
It could be board members. Board members typically are people, in those cases, who invested. They're also obviously independent board members. Investors are, aligned if they put their own money to the company, but there's also sometimes some conflicts of interest kind of on that side. But board members generally are great. But I was also thinking kind of a circle of some other private company CEOs who are in similar, not identical segments, just people who are also, working in the trenches and getting their advice on how they were able to improve certain metrics or different team issues or whatever it is that they can consult with somebody independently who they might not sit in the next board meeting with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have quite a extensive list of consultants that cover various different sectors, and yeah, we work quite closely with a good number of brilliant guys. They've been very helpful. But yeah, we don't have any board members or any investors to advise. We've got a great network of consultants.
And Bill, have you had experience with having a board of directors for you as good as having advisors, or and the role of the board for you is that an important for your organizations?
Well, I've been a board member for some studios in the past. Actually, my job pretty easy. I just, give them support when they need. When they need more resources, like for example, some studios, take longer than they thought to launch a game, so they need bridge loan. We just give them financial resources to make sure they can be successful. So as a board member, my job is just like a cheerleader.
Yeah.
Give them support whenever they need.
Yeah.
Make sure they can be successful.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Just to maybe just stop for a quick question. Are there any questions so far from the audience? I thought I'd just kind of put it out there as we kind of go through at this point. Just if there are, just shout them out. It's okay. One of the challenges that I think that we have here in Canada is Canadians have a fantastic capital market system, but it's really kind of geared towards oil and natural gas, right? A lot of Canadian startups, whether in the gaming space, whether in the technology space, they are frustrated with the capital markets because it doesn't necessarily favor our own. When you look at maybe some successful Canadian gaming companies, if you happen to have seen them, what do you think were the key successes that happened for them? If you were to advise, let me rephrase it, sorry. If you were to advise someone in the Canadian capital markets who may not be as educated as yourselves, how would you kind of point them into the gaming sector, into the technology sector?
I'm not fully qualified to answer that, I don't think, because I'm actually based
Come on, take a stab.
Well, I mean, I know that you have a Canadian media fund which seems to provide some very solid financial support to developers at various stages. I have heard it's quite paperwork heavy, but again, I don't have any first-hand experience with it. We have been pitched a number of titles that have had CMS support, but we've never signed because they've always been a little bit too chunky for us. But yeah, it does sound like a very realistic option if you're going to put the paperwork in.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, the way I look at it, it probably just takes some time and some key successes to also increase the interest in gaming in kind of whether it's Toronto Stock Exchange or others. And to some extent, for some of the successes, listing on Toronto first has been a stepping stone. Like if you look what Enthusiasts have been doing, they first, I think, were listed there and then moved over to, I believe, NASDAQ. Leave is another kind of Canadian developer. They also first listed there and also just doing a dual listing in the UK. So, the hurdles to go public are much, much lower compared to, let's say, NASDAQ. So companies are able to go out much, much earlier and still have, a good amount of interest. And at some point, it's for a lot of those companies just to get more access to institutional investor. It's time to graduate to another market. But my belief is the institutional investors in Canada, they probably also follow that and see it. And as there's been more successes out of Canadian companies to become really large, I think the interest in the segment will increase over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. the Canadian capital markets, the Canadian Securities Exchange, the TSXV, has very low barriers to entry to get access to capital in Canada. Is going public something that should be would be attractive to specifically a game developer, or should they stay away from that access from that capital market?
I just wanted to correct myself, sorry, I meant to repeat myself and I can go. We actually have worked with the Canadian developer for Blue Wizard Digital. We published game Slayway Camp on console, so just wanted to correct myself there. We have worked with the Canadian developer.
Oh, right on. Right on.
So it all depends a little bit on timing. Like 2021 was an amazing year for gaming companies to go public, either via IPO, a direct listing, or a SPAC deal. So if you just look at who went public, range from Roblox, massive success, to Grafton, to Unity, AppLovin, Playtika, Play Studios, Nexter, Skills, Cherry, and many others. It was that year for companies to go public. If you look what happened to the public markets of the listed gaming companies over the last 3 to 6 months, you'll see that there was a pretty steep decline in valuations across the board. You saw, Zynga had dropped very significantly before the acquisition. Microsoft arguably snapped up Activision at a steep discount versus where they were trading 6 months earlier. The same is true for a lot of gaming companies listed on Stockholm, Nasdaq, and other markets. So we have seen very, very little IPO and SPAC activity over the last, I would say 6 months. And I would argue the current gaming IPO market is frozen, mainly because, the public stocks just have declined so much, and it's currently not an attractive environment. But, those things can change very, very quickly, and who knows, maybe in a few months or some of those stocks spike up again, and everything looks much, much better. Very, very hard to predict. But currently, it's not an attractive environment for IPOs. It still is a very attractive environment on the M&A side. So there's very, very active M&A market, and that's kind of the two exits really companies should look at. Should they go public potentially, and then maybe grow via additional tuck-in acquisitions, or should they potentially, find a larger parent? And that's the segment, that's the path most companies are looking into now, just being acquired, being part of a larger family, leveraging larger audience, all this kind of things. And again, that market is still very, very hot.
Well, I would argue going public is very tough for game companies. Going IPO is a time-consuming and expensive process. And even after you go IPO, compliance is very expensive to do. Yeah. So I think acquisition, is a better path. For example, the company I started in 2008, Perfect World Entertainment, was acquired by Embracer for $125 million last year. A studio I invested called Unknown Worlds was acquired by a Korean publisher for $750 million last year too. So I think being acquired is a much easier path than going public. Going public, you have to meet quarterly financial targets. It's very tough to do that for gaming industry. Yeah. It's difficult to create other hit, and have increasing performance year after year, quarter after quarter. Yeah. So I would argue being acquired, it will be much easier path.
Right. Right. No, when we talk about M&A, we're talking about industry consolidation, whether it's in gaming or in esports. It does seem to be a path forward for companies to kind of go. But it does. Some people say that the consolidation is hurting the overall ecosystem. Some just say it's just the cycle. especially within the smaller indie gaming space being acquired, what does that do for the overall? Is it really good for the overall ecosystem? Is it really good for the overall gaming space to have this much consolidation going on right now?
Well, I don't think that's a bad thing to see more acquisition, more deals. Developers get rewarded for their efforts. For example, the developer I mentioned, Underworlds, they were acquired for $750 million for a studio less than 20 people. So that's pretty rewarding for the founders and the employees. So I think that's a good thing for the industry.
Yeah.
And I don't worry about too much impact to the industry for the consolidation. There are always new studios coming up from big companies. I have seen other people, ex-employees from Riot or Blizzard, start their own studios in the past 2 years.
Right.
So that's the nature of the industry.
Yeah.
There are big players pay for top performance studios. There are also new studios coming up. So that's the great thing about this industry.
Yeah.
There are no more downplay of our creativity.
So you're a pro consolidation fan.
Well, I'm pro developers.
Oh, okay.
It's good for developers,
Right.
when they, can take care of their family through this kind of acquisitions.
Fair. Pro consolidation, negative consolidation.
Consolidation. So just to be clear, so we advise companies being acquired on the M&A side. So that's 70% of what we're doing. So it's definitely very good for us and has been phenomenal for us last year, where we advised on a large number of gaming deals. I think it's also good all around. It provides liquidity for the founders. Often the founders stay 2, 3, 4 years as part of a new parent. They made a lot of money and then they start a new startup. Second, it provides more money flowing into the ecosystem. A lot of those people who have big exits do more angel investments, more money flowing into startups. So that's definitely a positive. And finally, it's also with the gaming space being more I guess, competitive and difficult to succeed, like on the mobile side with IDFA, for example, just taking advantage of being part of a larger family with a larger audience, where maybe, there could be more cross-promotion on new titles or existing titles. Let's make the UA piece easier. I think it's very helpful. And, just having more safety as well. And so I think it's very good for the industry.
Yeah, I kind of sit on both sides of it, I guess. We've seen a lot less viable content over the past year or so. I feel like products that are being pitched to us as an indie publisher are a little bit overpriced, and they aren't safe bets for us to make, and I think that is probably related to the kind of consolidation that's going on at the moment, and the big players that have got public money that can afford to maybe overpay for these products because they have a longer strategy. They want to buy the studio after product one and kind of roll them into their teams. On the flip side of that, though, there's only so much content that these big publishers can take, right? So, we have a chance to show our competitive advantage and, be very responsive with developers and very hands-on and, get back with answers very quickly and, try and we show our point of difference that, yes, we're smaller than these big guys, but we can maybe add a little bit more of a personal touch. So yeah, I'm either way. I think I wouldn't be against us getting acquired if the right offer came along, and it was the right team that we'd be working with. But I'm also quite happy, owning 100% of both the companies and doing it alone.
Nick, you sound like a Canadian, right up the middle.
There we go.
Very nice. So we do have a lot of smaller gaming organizations in the audience. I was just wondering if my one last question is, what would be one piece of advice that you would give a small indie firm that is ready to go? They're full of piss and vinegar. They want to hit the streets. What would be the best piece of advice that you would give a small studio at this stage in the market, in the economy, in the world?
I'd say focus on. Oh, sorry. After you, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I would say start small with a first project and just get something shipped. Learn what it takes to ship a project and go through the whole process with or without a publisher. But, take a data-driven approach, but start small. And ideas are great, but execution trumps ideas. So from us, when we're looking to publish products, we'll always look at the developers' previous titles, and if they haven't shipped before, that doesn't red flag them for us, but it is always helpful to see, even if it hasn't been a commercial success, that they've shipped something, they've then learned from that project if it wasn't successful, and that makes it, as long as we see that developers are learning from quote-unquote mistakes, that's a huge positive for us. So start kind of small, especially if you're bootstrapping, start small and just get your first game shipped and learn the process.
Right on.
Well, one thing I think you should remember is about patience. In this industry, some people succeed very early, in the early days, but it's very rare. Most developers I know take years of effort to be successful. Mm-hmm. For example, the developer I mentioned, Natural's Underworld, which sold for $750 million. They started company in 2008. They didn't have much success until the launch of Subnautica, which sold over 8 million copies later. But before that, they can hardly survive. The co-founders took only take a $40,000 a year in San Francisco, only $40,000 a year in San Francisco. So, the success of Subnautica was beyond everyone's expectations, but it showed the importance of patience.
It's very good.
Another good example is Epic. Mm-hmm. I know Tim Sweeney for many years, and when Tencent invest over $400 million and bought 40% equity of Epic, we thought that's a bad deal.
Yep.
Because Epic back then wasn't really profitable. Their core engine business didn't generate much revenue. Mm-hmm. I like Tim great guy. Tim Sweeney's great guy. I like him a lot. He's a great developer. But back then, if you look at the financials, it didn't make much sense to invest over $400 million into Epic. But then they got Fortnite coming out, and everything changed after Fortnite. So that's not a good example. Patience paid off. And let's also verify what I said before. Working with great people, eventually you'll pay off.
Yeah. Right on. Thank you. And Michael,
I would say it's never been easier to raise money. There never has been more capital available for being a startup than now. With a huge number of new funds, that's what we saw, as I mentioned before, kind of number of rounds increased to a new record in Q1 to 250 investments in private gaming companies. So, take advantage of that. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. Those things often go in cycles. So I would encourage the founders, try to raise some money, maybe raise a little bit more than what you need if you can, have the interest. And while focus on the game and all the operating aspects.
Right on. So there it is. It's, the answers are: get it shipped, have patience, and raise some dough. Is there any questions from the audience at this point? All right, good show. So I'm okay with giving you back 6 minutes of your day. Michael and Nick and Bill, thank you all very much for joining me here today, and I hope you have a good day, and we'll see you down the road.
Thank you very much.
Take care, guys. Thank you.